She looked me straight in the face and said it like she was tossing out last week's salad. My ex still knows how to treat me. No flinch. No guilt. Just that little smug tilt of her head that said she thought she'd won something. We'd just finished dinner. If you could call cold chicken and colder silence a meal. I'd asked if she wanted to go out for a drink, maybe a movie, something, anything. Her answer was another shrug. Then that line. That goddamn line. I didn't scream. Didn't throw anything. Didn't ask who he was or when it started. I just stood there and stared at her like she was a complete stranger who'd walked into my kitchen and started rearranging my life. Then I walked down the hallway, opened our bedroom closet, and pulled out the old leather duffel I hadn't touched in years. Threw in just enough to make it clear I wasn't running away. I was walking out. Clean. Sharp. Unapologetic. She followed me down the hall, arms crossed, smirking like some middle school kid who just won a staring contest. Wow. Really? That's it? You're just gonna pack up and run? I didn't answer. I didn't even look at her. But I opened the safe behind the bookshelf. Yeah, the one she never bothered to learn the combination to, and pulled out the black fireproof folder. The one I'd quietly filled over the past 6 months. She cocked her head when she saw it. What's that? I zipped my bag closed. Not tonight, I said, echoing her words. Then I left. And before we go further, if this hit you like it hit me that night, do me one favor. Hit subscribe. Over 90% of you listen without it. But this channel runs on real stories and real fire. Your support makes all the difference. Back to Natalie. She didn't call. Didn't text. Not that night. Not the next morning. That's the thing about people like her. They think silence means power. They don't understand that for some of us, silence is a scalpel. You use it when the work is already halfway done. She probably thought I was sulking in some dingy motel, eating takeout, and regretting everything. What she didn't know was that I'd left with more than my toothbrush and socks. I'd left with a blueprint, a list, and every document she ever signed without reading. Because 6 months earlier, when the headaches started and the girls' nights increased, I'd started paying attention. Not to her, but to everything around her. Our accounts, our joint assets, her smug little habit of forwarding me things to just sign. And I did sign, strategically. While she was busy being bored of me, I was quietly reassigning every key asset into new entities. Trusts, LLCs, all legally structured, all bulletproof. Some even in her name, but locked from the inside. Natalie had no idea that the beach condo she called her escape was technically owned by a shell corp with me listed as the controlling trustee, or that the rental property we argued about for weeks wasn't ours anymore. It had been sold to another shell, whose mailbox just happened to sit inside a storage unit in Nevada. And then there was the email backup. I'd mirrored our cloud accounts. Not to snoop. Not at first. But the day she left her laptop open and I saw a hotel confirmation under a different name, that changed things. The password resets. The bookings. The Venmo notes to D. They all painted the picture she thought I was too old or too tired to notice. I didn't tell anyone. Not my brother. Not my lawyer. Not yet. But I started preparing. Because Natalie wasn't just betraying a man. She was walking into a minefield she didn't know I'd spent 30 years learning how to build. Quiet. Steady. Concrete and steel. The night I left, I didn't slam the door. I didn't burn anything. I didn't cry. I drove to a small rental I'd prepped weeks ago. Keys under the mat, utilities already in place. And I sat down, opened my laptop, and started phase 2. Meanwhile, back at the house, she was probably pouring herself another glass of wine. Imagining me in some sad little motel, missing her. She had no idea the storm had already started. And she was standing dead center with a metal rod in her hand. She wouldn't realize it until Jenna came over. But by then, it was far too late. Jenna showed up the next evening, still in her work clothes, holding a bottle of red like it was a peace offering. Natalie barely looked up from the couch, where she was sprawled like a cat that had just knocked over a glass and blamed gravity. She smirked as Jenna stepped inside, already pouring 2 glasses before her friend could even kick off her shoes. Well, Natalie said, swirling her wine like a villain in a soap opera. The old man finally packed his flannel and fled. Took that weird folder too, probably filled with retirement brochures and spite. Jenna didn't laugh. She didn't even fake a smile. She sat, stiff, perching at the edge of the couch like she didn't want to get too comfortable near whatever fire Natalie had started. I thought you said he didn't know about Derek. Natalie rolled her eyes. He didn't. And if he did, what's he gonna do? Post about it on Nextdoor? He's not exactly Mr. Drama. Jenna leaned forward, brows pulled together. That's the problem. He doesn't do drama. He does plans. Structures. Remember the patio he built in my backyard? Quiet, fast, solid as hell. Didn't say a word, just showed up with a blueprint and turned gravel into something permanent. Natalie, Richard doesn't argue. He builds revenge that doesn't look like revenge until it's already concrete. Natalie waved her off, half laughing. You're being dramatic. Jenna didn't budge. Instead, she pulled her phone from her bag. Okay, then explain this. She opened an email and handed it over. Natalie took one look, and her smirk faltered. Sender, compliance-internal@westfordcapital.com. Subject, urgent, immediate action required. Body, please review your recent disclosures regarding off-site travel funded under corporate wellness grants. Failure to disclose romantic or personal relationships with associated individuals may result in an internal review and possible sanctions. Attached, a flag calendar entry. A name. A hotel. Her name. Derek's. The same Derek who had once been just a friend. The same one who still worked as a consultant for her firm. The same man who, until now, was just a ghost in her bedroom whispers. Natalie's fingers clenched around the phone. How the hell did this get flagged? Jenna sighed. You think Richard didn't notice you acting weird for months? That he just packed and left like a broken dog? Natalie, that man doesn't leave trails. He builds pressure. Quietly. And when it snaps, he's already on the other side of the mountain. Natalie bit her lip, scanning the email again, as if a second look might change the content. But how would he even access my company's systems? Jenna blinked. Nat, you forwarded him everything. You used his laptop when yours crashed last year, remember? You saved your work passwords on Chrome. I watched you do it at that lake house. You literally had a folder called HR Stuff on your desktop. I deleted that. Natalie hissed. Sure. You deleted the shortcut, Jenna said flatly. You think that means anything to a guy who used to manage development contracts with military subcontractors? Natalie felt her stomach drop. You're exaggerating. Jenna opened another file on her phone. This one just hit the internal chat at Westford. No one's named yet, but they're starting to whisper. Anonymous submission to compliance portal. Full documentation. Anonymous my ass. Natalie downed her wine in one gulp. Okay, let's say he sent it. So what? It's a slap on the wrist. HR crap. I'll survive. Maybe, Jenna said, watching her carefully. But if this is his opening move, you better pray it's just corporate. Because if he's building something permanent, he's not stopping with your job. He's tearing out the foundation. Quietly. Thoroughly. And if you're laughing now, it's because you still think you're the one holding the cards. Natalie's face finally cracked. She stood, walked to the kitchen, and poured another glass of wine. Her hand shook. Okay, she muttered. Okay, so he's mad. I hurt his pride. So what? He sends some emails, makes me look bad. He'll cool off. Jenna didn't answer. She just stared at her. And then, slowly, she said, You're still thinking like someone who can apologize their way out. But you didn't just hurt his pride. You insulted the wrong kind of quiet man. Natalie blinked. What does that mean? It means, Jenna said, standing now too, voice low, he's not cooling off. He's engineering. She picked up her purse. And you're still sitting in a house he owns, with utilities in a name you never bothered to check, acting like your jokes don't come with receipts. The door clicked shut behind her. And for the first time in weeks, Natalie didn't feel in control. She felt watched, calculated, outbuilt. The next morning, Natalie woke up in a king-sized bed that felt too empty and too quiet for someone who thought she'd just won. She yawned, stretched, and reached for Richard's iPad, still synced to the shared calendar they'd once used to plan vacations, house repairs, dinner parties back when they pretended to be functional. But this time, when she tapped the app, she got a message she'd never seen before. Access denied. Calendar permissions revoked. She blinked. Tried again. Same result. She muttered, What the hell? Then tried the family laptop. Same thing. The shared digital world they used to operate in, poof. She hadn't even noticed the locks clicking shut. So she did what people like her do when control slips through their fingers. She picked up the phone and started lying. She called Lisa, Richard's former assistant. Sweet, gullible Lisa who always adored Miss Natalie. Natalie put on her softest, most urgent voice. Lisa, hey, I'm so sorry to bug you. Richard's phone must be off, and I just need to know where he is. It's a family emergency. A pause. Lisa hesitated. Then, bless her overshare-prone heart. Oh, he's in Colorado, I think. He said something about escrow and compliance meetings. Something about the Evergreen file. You probably know more than I do. Natalie nearly dropped the phone. Evergreen. She hadn't heard that word in over a year. Evergreen was the name of the LLC tied to the mountain condo in Aspen, technically her little getaway. The one she told her friends was the one thing Richard gave me without strings. Only now she realized she never signed the purchase agreement. She just signed something. Something Richard slid in front of her one morning during breakfast. LLC papers, he'd said casually. Need your initials for tax reasons. She was scrolling Instagram at the time. She initialed blindly. And now, that same LLC was apparently involved in a compliance meeting and escrow process. In Colorado, Richard wasn't on vacation. He was executing. Natalie tried to breathe. Called the Aspen property manager. Voicemail. Tried again. On the fourth attempt, someone picked up. Hi. Yes, I'm calling about Unit 4C, she began. I'm the owner. A pause. Then, I'm sorry, ma'am. I'm not authorized to share details. Evergreen Holdings is listed as the primary contact, and we've been instructed to route all communication through counsel. Natalie's voice cracked. I am Evergreen Holdings. No, ma'am, the voice said politely. You're listed as a non-controlling member. The only contact with controlling authority is Richard Carlisle. Click. She stood in the middle of the living room, phone pressed to her chest, trying to make the numbers line up in her head. Aspen, LLC escrow, compliance. Words she once brushed off as Richie's boring business stuff now rang like hammers. She grabbed her laptop, frantically searching for old emails, documents, anything with her name and Evergreen in it. There were a few forwarded files she never read, just signed. Her signature, her initials. But every single document had one thing in common, small print. And his name beside every controlling title. He'd built the condo, given her keys, let her decorate it. But she never owned it. He did. She tried to call him. Straight to voicemail. Then she tried Derek. No answer. Sent a text. Do you know where Richard is? No reply. She stood in front of the large floor mirror in the hallway, the one she bought during her modern minimalist phase, staring at herself like maybe she'd spot some visible crack. Instead, she saw something worse. A reflection of a woman who never once asked, what am I really signing? A woman so used to floating on the surface of things, relationships, finances, conversations, that she never noticed the ground shifting under her heels. This wasn't a man having a breakdown. This was a man laying bricks in silence while she scrolled social media and sent flirty emojis to her ex. She wasn't just losing a vacation home. She was watching her illusions get repossessed. Not by force. Not with shouting. With paperwork. Executed perfectly. While she sipped wine and laughed. Natalie arrived at her usual salon just past noon, oversized sunglasses on, wearing the kind of smug confidence that comes from thinking you've got the upper hand. She greeted the receptionist with her usual faux warmth, flipping her hair like a shampoo commercial and glancing at her reflection as she was led to the stylist chair. Same cut, the stylist asked. Just a refresh, she replied casually, scrolling through her phone. She was already halfway through composing a text to Derek, something passive-aggressive and sultry, when the stylist wheeled over the cart. 30 minutes later, with her hair wrapped in foils and a latte cooling on the side table, she reached for her card to pay the deposit. Declined. She blinked. Tried again. Declined. She laughed awkwardly. Ugh, this bank. They're so paranoid about fraud lately. Let me try the backup. Swipe. Declined. The stylist looked at her like she was watching a real-time implosion of class status. Natalie forced a smile, cheeks stiff. Hang on. I'll just do a transfer. No biggie. She pulled out her phone and opened her banking app. The shared account, what she always called our safety net, was gone. Not low. Not locked. Zero. Balance, $0. Transaction, account closed. Card status, deactivated. She felt a chill crawl up the back of her neck. She called customer service, teeth clenched. Tried to sound composed. Hi. Yes, I'm seeing an issue with a joint account. Looks like it's been closed? That can't be right. The woman on the other end had the gentle tone of someone about to deliver bad news to a stranger they'd never have to see. Yes, I can confirm the joint account ending in -3402 was formally closed 6 days ago. Closure request was processed with the signatures of both account holders. Natalie laughed. That's impossible. I never signed anything. Another pause. Well, the rep said, we have scanned authorization forms with both signatures dated March 11th. Looks like it was submitted in person at the Glenview branch. March 11th. Her stomach twisted. That was the weekend Richard made her go to that stupid tax office. Said something about needing her signature on a form for deductions. Just routine, he'd said. pushing a folder across the kitchen table while she scrolled through Pinterest on her iPad. Initial here, sign there. She hadn't looked. She was halfway through planning a spring trip to Palm Springs with Jenna. She remembered that moment now with agonizing clarity. She remembered the exact feeling of not caring. She hung up mid-call and rushed outside, leaving her stylist and the foil wraps behind like some scene out of a reality show meltdown. She sat in her car, eyes wild, trying to piece it together. Richard hadn't just emptied the account. He hadn't hacked her. He didn't need to. He'd simply outthought her. 6 months in advance. He made her sign the closure authorization months ago, long before the snide remarks, before Derek resurfaced, before she even realized she'd emotionally left the marriage. Natalie opened her texts and searched for anything from that day. Found one. Richard, don't forget to swing by the branch on the way home. They'll need your ID. She never asked what for. Just went. Smiled at the teller. Signed what was put in front of her. Joked about being Mrs. Carlyle until the tax forms clear. They'd even laughed. Now that signature had stripped her of access to over $120,000 in liquid assets. And she had no idea where it had gone. She opened her credit card app. One remaining card still active. 10 grand limit. She felt her breath getting shallow. Dialed Richard. Straight to voicemail. She sent a text. What did you do with our account? Delivered. No reply. She stared at the message. Reread it. Our account. And then it hit her. That account hadn't been ours in months. She just didn't notice. Because she never needed to. Because he played the long game while she played dress up with her delusions. A small detail in her periphery snapped into focus. Richard had stopped using their shared card months ago. He'd switched to using a metal one she didn't recognize. She asked once, and he'd mumbled, new business account. She didn't care. That was the game. He talked boring, she tuned out. Now she sat in the driver's seat of a leased SUV, hands shaking, lipstick smudged, trying to understand how a man she thought was passive had just flipped the switch and pulled the plug. It wasn't just money. It was proof. Proof he'd watched her drift for months and responded like a man who builds for a living. Not with emotion. With structure. Natalie strutted into the glass tower downtown like she always did. Heels clicking, perfume trailing, phone glued to her ear. She greeted the front desk with her usual fake warmth and swept through security with her badge raised high, head held higher. From the outside, nothing had changed. Her reflection in the mirrored lobby walls still looked sharp, composed, professional, untouchable. But as she rode the elevator to the 28th floor, something felt off. Too quiet. She stepped into her department and immediately sensed it. A temperature drop. Coworkers stiffened at their desks. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Eyes flicked toward her, then away, like she was radioactive. Her boss, Greg, a guy who usually couldn't stop himself from making awkward dad jokes, saw her and immediately turned back to his monitor, pretending he hadn't. She stood still for a moment, absorbing the chill. Then she shook it off. People were weird sometimes. Maybe it was budget season. Maybe someone else had screwed up and she wasn't in the loop yet. By noon, she got the email. Subject: HR meeting, 12:30 p.m., conference room B. Participants: you, HR director, compliance lead. Her stomach tightened. She walked in 10 minutes early, like confidence might count for something. Sat down, smiled too wide, waited. The HR director entered first. No eye contact, just a polite nod. Then the compliance officer, someone she'd only met once, during onboarding. He looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. A man assigned to deliver news and quietly disappear. The folder on the table was already open. Ms. Bradford, the HR director began, her voice even. We've received documentation regarding a potential conflict of interest you failed to disclose. It pertains to your off-site engagement last quarter, specifically the Wellness Leadership Summit in Palm Springs. Natalie blinked. I submitted the post-conference survey and travel receipts. Everything was. The compliance officer slid a sheet across the table. A hotel invoice. Highlighted line. Room 204, complimentary, per vendor contract. Guest 1, Natalie Bradford. Guest 2, Derek Marshall. She froze. The same Derek she'd bumped into during that trip. The same ex she swore she had no current affiliation with. The same man who once worked on a vendor account her company had just reinitiated. Her voice barely worked. This, I didn't know it would flag. We didn't, this wasn't. Another document slid forward. Email attachment. Subject: still know how to treat you, winky face. From Marshall@softtechsolutions.com. 2. N.Bradford@westfordcapital.com. Attachment: booking_confirm.jpg. She couldn't breathe. How did you get these? The HR director cleared her throat. They were submitted through our third-party compliance portal. Fully anonymized, but extremely detailed. Natalie's fingers twitched at her sides. Someone had gone through the right channels. Not a scandal. Not a viral video. Just policy violation. Corporate misbehavior. The kind that doesn't shout. It simply removes your badge while you're mid-sentence. She tried to recover. This isn't what it looks like. That room was. He stopped by. We didn't coordinate. I didn't even think. You didn't disclose the relationship, the compliance officer said plainly. The appearance of impropriety is a breach in itself. But we didn't do anything illegal, she protested. No one's accusing you of illegality, the HR director said. We're assessing exposure, liability, vendor integrity, and ethics violations. This is procedural. Procedural. The ugliest word in the HR lexicon. Natalie's mind was racing. Who knew? Jenna? No. Jenna would have warned her. Derek? Unlikely. He was too self-preserving. No paper trail, no loose ends. Which left only one man. Richard. Her throat dried up. He hadn't screamed. He hadn't shown up to her office, drunk and dramatic. He hadn't threatened her. Instead, he used the tools she underestimated. The system. He'd submitted it quietly. Through the correct portal. No signature. No clue. But plenty of backup. He didn't need her fired. He needed her exposed. She asked, voice trembling, what happens now? We begin an internal review, the HR director said. You're not being terminated, but your vendor access is suspended. You'll be reassigned to a non-client-facing role during the review, pending further findings. Natalie stood up too fast. The room spun. I'll cooperate. Of course. This is just, she laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. Just a misunderstanding. An old friend and bad timing. No one responded. She walked out of the room slower than she entered. The door closed behind her like a vault. Outside, her co-workers didn't even pretend not to look. A few exchanged glances. One girl whispered behind a hand. Natalie made it back to her desk, opened a blank email to Derek, and deleted it. No good would come of that. Then she opened the compliance portal URL. Just to look. The report ID number was there. Timestamped. Dated the morning after she'd said that line to Richard in the kitchen. My ex still knows how to treat me. Apparently, so did her husband. He treated her to consequences. Wrapped in professionalism. Delivered with a bow. The doorman barely looked up when Natalie strutted through the marble foyer of the Vireo, a luxury building she'd proudly called her personal escape hatch. She tossed him a forced smile, pretending everything was normal, pretending the heels she wore weren't wobbling under pressure. But the moment she turned the corner toward the elevators, she froze. Something ugly was taped to the door of Unit 804. Bold red print. Eviction notice. Non-payment of contractual obligations. Unit to be vacated immediately. Her jaw dropped. She ripped it off the door, heart pounding, and shoved her key into the lock. It clicked, but not open. Deadbolt. She banged her fist against the door. What the hell? Click. From the inside, the door unlatched. A man in a uniform shirt, Mover's logo on the chest, opened it partway. You Natalie? What are you doing in my apartment? He shrugged. We've been authorized to clear it out. Everything's already inventoried. Shouldn't take long. She shoved past him, heels clicking furiously against hardwood floors. Authorized by who? I pay this lease 6 months in advance. I wired it personally. I live here. The unit was chaos. Boxes half-packed. Her clothes stacked like afterthoughts. Her toiletries in Ziploc bags on the counter. In the living room stood the leasing agent, clipboard in hand, eyes wide with performative sympathy. Ms. Bradford, she said, voice honey-dipped, we've tried to reach you. There's been a complication with the payment source. Natalie stormed over. There's no complication. I paid 6 months ahead. You confirmed it. Yes, but the payment came from an entity called Calyx Holdings LLC. Natalie blinked. So, well, last week, they initiated a clawback on all prepaid funds. Retroactively. And because the lease is under their name, we were legally required to process the refund and initiate vacancy. Natalie stared, unblinking. I don't understand. I signed the lease. The agent shook her head slowly. You countersigned. As occupant. But the leaseholder of record, the entity that holds the rights to the unit, is Calyx Holdings. Registered in Delaware. The room spun. Delaware. That was Richard's go-to. She used to joke that his trust accounts had more passports than she did. Why Delaware? She'd once asked. Because it's quiet, he'd replied. And no one asks questions. Natalie's voice cracked. This is my name on the mail. My name on the call box. None of which makes you a legal tenant, the leasing agent said kindly, almost apologetically. You were the designated user. That's a separate category. The mover leaned in. Should we finish packing the bedroom? Natalie turned on him like a wild animal. No, you can't touch that. I live here. You can't. But then her words caught in her throat. Because she remembered something. 6 months ago, Richard had made a dry joke over dinner. You're not the first woman to lease a space she never really owned. She hadn't paid attention. At the time, she thought he was referencing something he'd seen on the news. Now she realized he was foreshadowing. Her breathing turned shallow. Wait, she said, eyes darting. If the lease is void, I can reinstate it, right? I'll pay now. I'll wire funds today. I have the money. The leasing agent hesitated. Unfortunately, the unit is now in reassignment status. Another party has already expressed intent to lease. There's a 48-hour lockout window, and you're no longer the authorized contact. Natalie stumbled back into the kitchen island. That unit had been her secret world. The place she went when she needed space from Richard. The apartment she used to host Derek. The place she stored gifts she didn't want Richard to see. The place she whispered and laughed and felt clever. And it wasn't hers. It never had been. He'd let her play tenant. Gave her keys. Let her decorate. Gave her the illusion of independence. But every piece of paperwork had his fingerprints behind the curtain. She was a guest. A squatter with permission. Now, the permission was gone. And the only thing more humiliating than realizing she was being evicted was realizing she'd been allowed to exist here. Like a tenant in a simulation built to implode the moment she got too comfortable. Her phone buzzed. An email. Subject, digital mailroom receipt, Calyx Holdings, LLC. Refund processed for leasehold account number 804. Funds reabsorbed under clawback clause per termination protocol. The date? Same day, she told Richard. My ex still knows how to treat me. She stared at the screen. He wasn't just reacting. He timed it. Pulled the floorboards the second she thought she'd learned to dance. Natalie dropped the eviction notice. For once, she had nothing to say. Natalie had just poured herself a third glass of wine when the buzzer rang. She didn't move at first. Just sat there on the couch of her now painfully temporary apartment. Bare walls, half-unpacked boxes, a vase of dying roses she'd bought herself out of stubbornness. The wine sloshed in her glass like it was trying to flee. The buzzer rang again. More urgent. She stumbled to the panel, pressed the speaker. Yeah. It's me, Jenna's voice snapped. Open the door. Natalie buzzed her in, confused. Jenna never used that tone unless something was very wrong. A minute later, the door flew open and Jenna stormed in like she'd just left a crime scene. I've been calling you for 2 days, she hissed. Natalie blinked. I've been busy. With what? Getting evicted from your own fantasy land. Natalie's face darkened. You don't get to lecture me. Jenna didn't even flinch. She marched straight to the kitchen island and slapped down a thick, manila folder. Then let this do it. Natalie stared at it. What is this? Jenna's eyes were wide, unblinking. Proof you've been erased. Natalie let out a breathy, bitter laugh. He's bluffing. This is all show. A temper tantrum in slow motion. He'll get bored. Jenna didn't smile. No, he's not bluffing. He's strategizing. And you're still stuck in episode 1 of your own sitcom while he's already producing the finale. Natalie snatched the folder open, heart pounding. Inside, a screenshot. A login dashboard. Secure server. Internal administrative portal. Title at the top. Rescinded spousal access. Finalized. Submission ID. Timestamped. Her name. Her old email. Her archived authorization codes. Status. Access privileges revoked permanently. Natalie's knees gave a little. Jenna stepped forward, voice low. He filed it the night you said that thing about your ex. Natalie shook her head. No. He can't just erase me from our accounts. He didn't, Jenna said. You erased yourself. He just submitted the paperwork. Natalie gripped the edge of the counter. What else is in here? Jenna didn't blink. Trust revocation. Estate beneficiary update. Medical directive override. Emergency contact removal. Everything. Every single channel where your name once sat next to his. It's gone. You're not his wife in any legal system that matters. You're not even a contact. Natalie felt her vision narrow. Her ears rang. He's divorcing me without divorcing me. No, Jenna said, voice barely a whisper. He's dissolving you. Silence hung between them like a loaded gun. Natalie picked up the screenshot, scanned the fine print, searching for loopholes. The portal was tied to a legal management firm in Boston, a boutique firm that specialized in executive asset restructuring. She remembered the name now. Richard mentioned them once during a dinner party. Something about quiet exits. At the time, she laughed and said it sounded like a luxury hospice for rich people. He smiled, didn't reply. He'd already picked the firm, already chosen the door, already removed her from every future she assumed she was part of. He's not doing this to hurt you, Jenna said, watching her carefully. He's doing it to clear the slate. Like you were a file to be archived. No scandal. No public mess. Just delete. Natalie shook her head, a manic edge rising in her voice. He can't just erase a marriage. There are laws, rights, community property, which he protected 6 months ago, Jenna cut in. You signed forms. You didn't read them. You thought he was boring, harmless, easy to walk around. Natalie's hands clenched around the folder. So what? I just lose everything? He gets to pretend I never existed? Jenna sighed. No, you still exist. Just not in any room he's walking into. The door behind her creaked. The building shifted. Somewhere down the hall, someone laughed. It all sounded distant. Natalie lowered herself into a chair, staring at the folder like it might burst into flames. You said he doesn't do messy fights, she whispered. Jenna nodded. He doesn't. Natalie looked up, voice hollow. Then what is this? Jenna paused. This is architectural revenge. The kind you don't see until you realize you're standing in a house that's already been condemned. Natalie didn't cry. Not yet. Because somewhere, beneath all the denial, she realized she'd mistaken quiet for weak. And Richard had simply waited for the foundation to rot before bulldozing her out of his future. Natalie couldn't sleep. Not because of guilt. She still hadn't fully accepted that emotion, but because the silence was getting too loud. It wasn't just the lack of text from Derek or the way Jenna had left without saying goodbye. It was the void Richard had created. It was spreading, swallowing parts of her life one legal clause at a time. She needed leverage. Something. Anything. She sat up in bed, grabbed her phone, and began digging through her voice memos. Somewhere in there, she remembered, was a recording, one she'd made months ago. She couldn't even recall why. Maybe it was meant to be proof of Richard's emotional detachment, or maybe it was one of those drunken moments when she thought she was being hilarious. The file was titled, LOL_rich_silent_treatment. She hit play. The sound crackled for a moment. Then came her own voice, bright, smug, recorded over the soft clink of wine glasses. You know, maybe I'll just keep Derek on the side. You'd barely notice. You're so busy alphabetizing the damn freezer. Then Richard's voice, quiet, tired. You think that's funny? She giggled in the recording. You used to have a sense of humor, babe. Lighten up. Another pause. Then Richard again, flat. Do you want this marriage, or do you just like the way it decorates your tax return? More laughter from her. God, you're dramatic. Relax. I'm just playing. She hit stop. Natalie stared at the phone in her hand like it had just started leaking poison. What had once been a flippant joke now sounded like a confession, a weapon. Something a man like Richard could slide across a polished table in a quiet courtroom. Something that would land like a stone. She checked the metadata. Recorded 8 months ago. Back then, she hadn't known Richard had the shared cloud still linked. She hadn't thought twice about syncing backups. The phone had done it automatically, uploading everything to their shared drive, including that memo. She opened the shared cloud account and checked the access log. Richard had downloaded the file 3 days ago. 3 days ago. Her heart stopped. She scrambled to her laptop, trying to revoke access, delete the file, pull it from anywhere he might have saved it, but it was too late. The horse had left the barn, and she was standing there with a broken lock in her hand, pretending she still had a gate. She tried to rationalize it. It's just a joke, she muttered aloud. No names, no dates, no proof anything happened. But it was more than a joke. It was her voice, her laughter, her exact tone, dripping with mockery, in direct response to her husband questioning the integrity of their marriage. And in a legal battle, tone mattered, especially when you were trying to argue for spousal support. Her lawyer had already warned her. If he's documenting this, and you're seeking alimony or asset retention, you better be clean. Judges don't like liars. They hate manipulators. And now she had a voice memo labeled in her own smug handwriting that sounded like Exhibit A in a psychological profile for marital fraud. She opened her texts, started typing to Jenna. Do you remember that recording I made of Richard? About Derek? She deleted it. Rewrote. Hypothetically, if someone recorded a convo where they joked about cheating, could that? Delete it again. It didn't matter. The damage was already done. Richard didn't need to say anything. All he had to do was play that clip in the right room, with the right silence before and after, and let it sink in. Natalie buried her face in her hands. This wasn't some tabloid scandal with screaming and mascara running down cheeks. This wasn't a tearful confession in front of cameras. This was a slowly collapsing tower, foundation eaten from the inside. And the worst part? She had built half the supports herself. With a joke, with a smirk, with her own goddamn voice. She stood, pacing, then stopped abruptly, realization hitting her like a slap. If Richard had the recording, he wouldn't need to say a word in court. He wouldn't even need to argue. He'd just wait for her to file for anything. Alimony, property, support, anything. Then he'd quietly submit the file. Let the recording do the talking. Let the judge hear the sarcasm. Let the system, which he respected far more than she ever did, do its job. She'd go from wronged wife to documented adulteress in 12 seconds. Natalie collapsed onto the couch, glassy-eyed, her phone slipping from her fingers. She didn't just dig her own grave. She mic'd herself while doing it. It took her 3 hours to draft the email. Natalie stared at the blinking cursor like it owed her an explanation. She started with Richard, please, deleted it. Tried again, can we talk like adults? Deleted that too. Every version felt either too manipulative or too hollow. In the end, she typed what was probably closest to the truth. I don't even recognize you anymore. I know I made mistakes, but this doesn't feel fair. We spent years building a life. We were partners. Don't you think I deserve at least a conversation? She reread it 5 times, hit send, and immediately regretted it. But not as much as she regretted checking her inbox obsessively for the next 48 hours. Nothing. No reply. No text. Not even a read receipt. She refreshed her inbox again and again until the act itself felt ritualistic. Like maybe if she just stared hard enough, he'd have to respond. On the 3rd night, sleep-deprived and twitchy, she heard the ping. Her eyes darted to the screen. From litigation@leonardharperlaw.com. Subject, closure. She opened it. Ms. Bradford, this firm has been retained to represent Mr. Richard Carlisle regarding all matters related to the dissolution of financial and legal ties with you. We respectfully request that all further communication be directed to our office. Any personal contact may be interpreted as harassment and will be addressed accordingly. Attached to this correspondence is a comprehensive audit of all shared assets, pre- and post-marriage. This includes joint financial accounts, closed, shared real estate holdings, divested or reassigned, business and LLC partnerships, restructured and legally exited, medical, legal, and insurance authorizations, rescinded, trusts and retirement accounts, petitioned or revoked. This report has been reviewed by independent auditors and filed with the appropriate custodians. No pending disputes remain. No assets are in question. This message serves as formal notification that Mr. Carlisle considers all personal and legal chapters with you closed. Thank you. Benjamin O. Harper, ESQ. Leonard, Harper and Ross, LLP. Natalie stared at the words, her mouth open but silent. She scrolled down. Attached was a PDF. 86 pages of meticulously itemized accounts, timestamps, withdrawal logs, retitling of property deeds, closure confirmations from banks, custodial signatures. Everything accounted for. Every tie severed. No room left for he said/she said. No accusation to leverage. No loophole to exploit. Not even a single typo. He had documented the death of their marriage like a forensic scientist. Even the title of the email, Closure, was surgical. It didn't say ending. Didn't say divorce. It said closure. Like a project that had gone over budget, dragged on too long, and had finally been shut down. A business term. A box ticked. She scrolled again, hoping for something more. A note. A signature. A single line in his own words. Nothing. The only trace of him was the absence of emotion. Natalie sat back on her stiff apartment couch and felt the full weight of what he'd done. Not loudly, not vindicatively, but precisely. This wasn't revenge. This was administrative annihilation. She was holding legal paperwork, but what she really held was a gravestone. Richard hadn't ghosted her. He'd memorialized her, and then filed her under no further action required. The apartment was cold again. Not from the weather. Summer still clung to the windows, but from the weight of stillness. Natalie hadn't turned on a single light. The wine bottle lay half-drained on the kitchen counter. The curtains were shut, not for privacy, but because the sun had the audacity to shine while her world was eroding in the dark. She sat on the couch, barefoot, wrapped in one of Richard's old college hoodies. Ironic, considering she used to tease him for wearing it around the house. Now it was the only thing left that still smelled like his life. Her life. Their life. The silence was louder than any screaming match they never had. It echoed in her bones. Then bang. The front door slammed open so hard it hit the stopper and bounced. Jenna stormed in like a tornado wrapped in disbelief, her face ghost white, one trembling hand clutching a rolled-up newspaper. Natalie jolted. Jesus, Jen. You idiot. Jenna snapped, voice cracking. You think he walked away? Natalie blinked slowly. He's gone. He's not responding. The lawyer. Jenna threw the paper down. It skidded across the glass coffee table and slammed against Natalie's knee. Read it. Natalie flinched, then slowly unrolled it. Front page, bold headline. Real estate powerhouse donates $3 million property to women's legal shelter in name of ex-wife's infidelity clause. There was a photo beneath it. A ribbon-cutting ceremony. Smiling women. A new facility. And standing behind them, in a charcoal suit and navy tie, was Richard. Not beaming. Not posing. Just there. Present. Composed. A ghost she couldn't haunt anymore. Natalie's breath hitched. She read the article. Or tried to. Her eyes darted over phrases. Anonymous, but confirmed to be structured by Carlyle Holdings. Donation processed through an LLC tied to divorce clauses and moral conduct provisions. Internal documents name a Natalie Bradford as the behavioral trigger for clause activation. Her name, in print, immortalized, tied not to a charity, but to the reason it existed. He hadn't written a revenge post, hadn't filmed a tell-all. He'd built a monument to what she'd done, and carved her name into the foundation. He used you, Jenna whispered, voice shaking. He used your betrayal as legal leverage to trigger a dormant clause in a trust agreement. That building wasn't just donated. It was forfeited. He structured it so that the moment you broke fidelity, the property defaulted to a cause you'd never be able to touch. Natalie's lips parted, but no words came. He built a building, Jenna continued, eyes glassy. Named it after his reclamation clause. The lawyers are already calling it a landmark in private asset litigation. It'll be studied. Natalie clutched the hoodie closer, her nails digging into the seams. And you? Jenna snapped. You thought you were winning. You mocked him while he wrote a legacy. Natalie gasped. He can't. He used my name. No, Jenna said flatly. He used your actions. The name was just the signature. Silence. Heavy. Final. Natalie dropped the paper. It fluttered to the floor like an indictment. She collapsed to her knees, staring blankly ahead. He had erased her from his life, but carved her into history. Not as a wife. Not as a partner. As a warning.